Isaac Hernandez.
And I'm Holly McClure.
And this is Faith on Film, a program designed to keep you aware on everything that's happening in the world of faith and family entertainment. How are you doing, Holly?
Doing great, thanks. I'm excited to do this show today because we have a friend coming on, and he's a friend to both of us, and I can't wait to get him on and talk to him.
Been a friend for a long time, and you know what? God put some of us in the Christian space, if you will, like me. I've been involved in media, but in the Christian media pretty much all my life, except for 1 year that I did a little bit of Hollywood when I was doing some work for PAX TV. But then he takes others and he puts them right in the middle of Hollywood, sort of like Daniel in the Lion's Den. Interestingly enough,
Yes,
this guy's name is Dan. But you know, Daniel in the Lion's Den.
That's right.
Or he can also be, he can be a light in the darkness, or salt.
That's right.
The salt in the earth. And our guest today, well, that's been his experience. Dan Rupple has been working in the media industry for over 40 years. He was the production supervisor for CBS Television in Hollywood, supervising shows such as Prime Emmy Awards, Family Feud, West Coast production of the David Letterman Show. We're talking way up there here now.
Big time.
And now, of course, he is the CEO of Master Media, which is what we're going to talk about mostly here. But before we do that, we want to learn a little bit about kind of his journey into that. So, Dan, welcome to Faith on Film, man. How are you?
Hello, my friends. It is so good to see you both.
So good to see you. We are old friends, aren't we? We all go back.
Yeah, we go way back, at least.
Who are you calling old?
The mid '80s.
We said we're old friends.
Right, there you go. There
Yeah,
you go.
you know,
Holly, let's use the word vintage.
Let's use the word.
Vintage.
Let's use that word. Back to the 90s.
Yeah, my vintage bones, thank you.
Yes.
Now, so Dan, I know I met you, I don't know, 17, 18, 19, 20 years ago or something like that, and Holly probably even before that. But I knew of you before that, even when, as a young man, I went to some kind of rally or some kind of service at a big old church over there called Melodyland, and you were part of a comedy group, a comedy troupe that I just found so funny. I literally went out after that and found your records and bought them. And not only did I listen to them all the time, I actually started performing some of your skits at church without your permission, of course. So hopefully you...
Disclosure.
I didn't know that.
You better collect some residuals.
Yes, I did a few of those. I did the what was that, like the Let's Make a Deal one? I used to do that one at
Let's
church.
trade your salvation.
Yes. Yeah, but anyway, you know what? Why don't you, I know we're going to talk a lot about what you're presently doing, but let's start off, though, with telling us a little bit about your journey into media, and specifically your start as a comedian, and how, you were kind of ahead of your time there, weren't you?
Absolutely. It's a long story, but it really launched everything I did after that. So I need to bullet point it. When I was 15 years old, I formed a little improv troupe out of the high school drama department in our theater group, and we started performing local, community centers and school assemblies and things like that. And then I got real bold, and I said, "Hey, why don't we drive up to Hollywood and perform in the comedy clubs?" And one of the guys in the group had his license, so we drove up there. And we would play the Comedy Store had just opened. We played the Comedy Store, the Troubadour, the Ice House. And this went on into my college years. And we were opening for Lily Tomlin. We made the short list of the first cast of Saturday Night Live. It was down to my group and Al Franken and Tom Davis. And they picked Al Franken and Tom Davis, thank God, because, 2 years later, I came to faith in Christ. And this is where God's sovereign hand really wanted to launch Christian comedy from a really relevant contemporary perspective. And I show up at rehearsal to quit, because the kind of stuff we were doing in clubs, you can imagine. But I show up and I said, "Hey, I got to tell you guys, I just came and gave my life to the Lord, and I'm going to leave the group tonight." I turned to my one partner, Dave Toole, and he says, just since we got together last, I became a Christian, and I was going to leave the group tonight. And then we turned to my old high school friend, Larry Watt, and he said, "Last week I rededicated my life to Christ." And So we're not rocket scientists, but we could kind of figure it out that God was up to something.
Yeah.
So fortunately, we were not only embraced by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa, where they tried us, opening for Keith Green and different groups back in that era, but also the Christian audience. And as you guys know, what God had done with rock and roll music in giving it a Christian vocabulary for the hippie generation, now it was time to do it in comedy. And so we launched into Isaac Air Freight. That was 15 years. We did about 8 albums, and it was very, very, very successful. But in the late 80s, I felt the Lord was leading me into either film or television. And and this is where I really remember Holly, with a quick stop in Christian radio, morning talk show, God opened a miraculous door at CBS. And Isaac, you know television production inside now. I knew very little. I mean, I could barely set the timer on my VCR back in those days. I knew very little about TV production, but I won't get into the long, miraculous story. God opened the door. And for the next 10 years, I was the supervising producer on The Price is Right. And then a few years later, Letterman came. And that was a joy to do all West Coast production of Letterman. And, it's just been a wonderful journey. And then it's gone on from there.
A lot of people would say that was a joy working with Letterman. they would wonder about that. But, at that time, it was his heyday.
He was very, very kind to me. And same with Barker. Barker was very, very kind to me. And but my real takeaway, and I'm still in touch, is the crew. There was so many people involved, above the line, below the line, with Letterman, but my Price is Right crew, there was over 100. And I'm still friends with all of them.
Wow.
What are we now, 20 years later? We're still friends. I talked to the executive producer of Price is Right just 2 weeks ago. So we really formed, they became family. And when it was time to leave, I left because my pastor asked if I would come on as his executive pastor. And to be honest with you guys, inside I'm thinking, are you nuts? I'm going to leave a gig like Price is Right and Letterman to be your executive pastor. But my wife and we went away to Palm Springs and we fasted for a weekend and just sought the Lord. And we said, Lord, our lives are in your hands. Whatever you want us to do, we will do. And the Lord spoke to both of our hearts and said, I want you, out of obedience, to resign from CBS, take on the pastor's position.
Wow.
And then I'm going to bring you back into the entertainment arena down the road. And so I resigned. And when I went, this is my most wonderful, well done, good and faithful servant moment. I walked into Bob Barker's dressing room and I said, Bob, I'm going to be leaving the show. And he says, boy, I hate to lose you. What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to pastor. And he thought for a second and he said, Dan, I think that's right, because I've always seen you as the pastor of Price is Right. And to me, it was like, okay, I fulfilled my assignment of being, as you mentioned earlier, Isaac, salt and light, and an ambassador for Christ within the industry.
And I think it was interesting because at the time I was going on Politically Incorrect, and I did that for 5 years. I made several appearances and was on there. And I used to love to go in there and see your son, Nathan, because I think he was interning at the time. I think it was Price is Right or something. And I thought, oh, how great that your son, to see that pass on to another generation, the love you had for it. And then your son was doing it. We had such a good time seeing each other, as I passed to going to be on that show. It was fun. So even your son, your kids.
He followed in my footsteps.
Yeah, followed the footsteps.
Dan, you and I have somewhat of a parallel life here, because I, of course, also was, again, in media for a long time. But there was a period of time when God called me out to become a pastor. Now, I did not want to do this, and I mentioned this on the previous show, but the things that I was doing, which was part of my career, God literally took away. Now you answered the call and you obeyed. I didn't want to do it, so He had to take away. I didn't quit.
I've been meaning to talk to you about that, Isaac.
I know, but you know what? Now I realize that it was the journey that I needed to take to come back into media, just like you, and take it from a different perspective. And I mentioned it last week, and I've mentioned it several times, is that I sort of feel like I'm in a pastoral position, but into the world of media. So I don't know. I asked Tim on last week's show, what if would he ever feel like returning back to pastoring? So I'm going to ask you the same question. Would you ever want to go back to pastoring a church?
Not a church, but I feel in my present role with Master Media, I am pastoring.
Yes.
You know, whenever God calls you to arena, especially the work I do with Master Media, we can drill into that in a second, but I believe everyone, Christian or non-Christian, needs a spiritual voice into their lives, a pastoral role, someone who will shepherd them from a spiritual Christian perspective. And so I believe I am pastoring. It's just not in your traditional service in the church model.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
And you definitely are. Let's talk about Master Media, because the fact that Larry Poland was doing it, who years ago was doing it, and I remember working with Larry, and when I say working with, we would interview him and talk about what you guys were doing, because it was interesting to have Hollywood intersect with the Christian world, and yet you do it in a very undercover way, and we would always say, okay, Larry, tell us, like, who is the big producer you're praying for? And he goes, well, I can't mention names. Then you came in and stepped in, didn't you? And tell how that happened.
Yeah. What happened, Holly, is Peggy and I were going through a season where we just felt our next act is going to be Act 3. We were really seeking the Lord for what is the next chapter, possibly the last chapter of real active ministry in our lives. So we fasted and prayed every Monday, and we got a dry erase board. We put it in our living room, and we would write words on it, like things that we were passionate about, things that bore fruit in our lives, things that we were gifted in, etc. And over the weeks, God began to narrow down that really full, dry erase board to 3 words. And the Lord said, media, ministry, mentoring.
Wow.
And the Lord spoke to us that seek something that has all 3 of these components, and don't say yes to, if it has 2 components but not third, say no to it. And so I got real active, and I wrote about a 15-page ministry statement or mission statement of what that would look like. And then, to be honest with you, man, that was my season of the soul. It took like 3 years, and I would, meanwhile, our savings is going down, and I'd go for walks in the morning. I just cry out to the Lord. It's like, God, I'm on the launching pad. I'm it's kind of like Bill Murray in What About Bob? I'm not a slacker. I'm doing the work. It's like I'm on the launching pad like the fuse.
Yes.
And but then I get a call out of the blue, and as you, Holly, I was very familiar with Master Media. I've been on many different panels with Larry, and I go way back with him. And they said, Larry Poland's going to retire, and they're looking for a new CEO. Would you be interested? And I said, well, what does it entail? And they said, we're looking for somebody who has a real passion for media, ministry, and mentoring.
Oh my gosh.
And it's like, again, I'm not a rocket scientist. But
Did lightning strike? I mean, it's one of those God moments.
I said, sign me up. And that began the journey.
And that was the journey.
Why don't you share with us, what is Master Media? Because we can't assume people out there, watching the show know what Master Media is all about. What exactly is Master Media?
Well, Larry Poland was really a pioneer of Hollywood ministry, as we know it. In 85, he launched Master Media, and basically the primary purpose was to form relationship with top executives at the highest level, the real gatekeepers of Hollywood, and to form a relationship where you go in and have a very respectful, friendly dialogue on the state of the media, the Christian community, the Christian faith, as well as some of the nuances of our community. And as that, and then also pray with them. Always pray for them before we leave an office. And those relationships, which were built over time, pretty soon we had real trust. And then when an executive would get in a real problem out of the blue, these are non-Christians, they would call and say, can you pray for me? I'm struggling. I'm going through a divorce, or my kid just ran off, or whatever, you know. And that was one of the primary models. When I came in 7 years ago now, you know, obviously the media has changed radically. It's no longer this pyramid with gatekeepers at the top that you know, rule everything. It's with digital, it's much flatter, where anybody can be a media star. As you guys know, you can, you know, a little kid in Des Moines who has a YouTube channel can have 4 million followers. You know? So you have great influence at the ground level. The other thing that digital brought is it spread where Hollywood was no longer a geographic location, it was a global concept. So you see Hollywood in Georgia, in Austin, in Vancouver, in Albuquerque, certainly New York too. It's really omnipresent anymore. So what we did is we had to shift our model. We still meet with every executive or influential filmmaker we can, but we also, in all these cities and regions I just mentioned, we set up Christian community to support. As you guys know, you can't be a lone ranger in this industry, especially as a Christian. God created us for community, and we need the body. We need people to pray with us, to celebrate our wins, and to commiserate with us on our no's, which are more, there's a lot more of those than the yeses. And so we set up communities where we can encourage them and pray with them, and they can develop lifelong friendships. And then the third thing we do, and we recently brought the wonderful master program, Act One, under as a division of Master Media. And we say that Act One, which is a screenwriting and producing course, is really grad school for those that don't have the time or money for grad school. And it's taught by veteran Christian writers and producers at the top of their game. And what we want to do is pour into the next generation, because I believe to really change the media world, we need an influx of extremely talented, but also stellar in their Christian character, young people who are going to populate every level of film production. It can be a grip, it can be a PA, it can be the director, it can be the screenwriter, it can be the star, it can be the executive. Whatever role it can be, the more Christians we have on set, as you guys know this too, the more we have on set, the more we can start changing the ethos of the media culture. And that's our heart and what we're trying to accomplish with Master Media.
Are you working with, because again, the old format was studio system and, you know, all the heads and you kind of went from there to the television. Well, now there's streaming and there's so many different outlets. Do you find you're working with people from TikTok? Are you working with influencers? Are you working with that kind of thing?
Yes, we are. And it doesn't come without real challenges on two fronts. In traditional media, you know, in the old days, you would be in that position maybe for 30 years. You know, the CEO of NBC or something. You may be there for 20 years or 30 years. As you know, it changes every 10 seconds. I mean, that's an exaggeration, but not by much.
It does.
You know, because one green light of a movie that bombs, you're gone. And because of that, there is a high level of fear There is so much fear in Hollywood because they know the next film may be my last. The next role might be my last. And COVID brought that on steroids. And we have found an incredible open door for the gospel, because I get emails, I get phone calls, I get texts from people that say, I think I'm going to lose my job. Can you pray for me?
Wow.
I had a gentleman in a very high position in network in New York. He called me and he said, I want you to know first, you're going to read it in Variety tomorrow. I just got let go on, what is the term? An inappropriate, conduct in the workplace.
Wow.
And it was a bad atmosphere that he was setting for the people under him, and especially the women. And he just said, I just want you to know first. And I prayed with him. And, this is interesting. This is really showing the love and heart of God. The next time I was going to New York, I got a hold of him and I said, hey, I want to meet. And he said, well, Dan, you know I'm not in that position anymore. And I said, I don't care. I said, I don't want to see you because of the position you were in. I want to see you because I care.
Oh.
And then his next thing was, won't you be embarrassed to see me out in public?
Wow.
And I said, no.
Wow.
No. And so we met at a Starbucks, a little coffee house. And we had the most wonderful talk about forgiveness and grace and the heart of God and kindness. And then at the end, I said, well, hey, before we leave, I want to pray for you. And he went, no, not here in public. I'll tell you what, I'm not even going to close my eyes. I'm not going to bow my head. I'm just going to hold my coffee cup and I'm going to look at you.
Oh.
And no one will even know.
Oh,
and
I like
he goes,
that.
okay, and I just said, Lord, I just pray. And I just started praying over it. And the Lord brought such prophetic refreshment to him. And he just started crying, talk about making a scene in public, that he's crying.
Yeah.
But those kinds of things are glorious, but it's because there's so much fear
Yes.
Within the ministry, or I'm sorry, the media, that people they realize that they can't rely on their own resources and their own strength to keep that job. It's beyond their control, and they want to turn to some kind of higher power. And they, it's like, we'll turn to Dan, talk to him and see if he could tap into something better than me or bigger than me.
Can I ask a quick question? And Isaac, I know you have some stuff you want to mention too, but before I forget this, Dan, with recent things happening in media like Disney and what they proclaim that they're doing, the agenda, and what they're doing in the system now with young people, it's gone to a whole new level, in my opinion, on what's going on in these corporations and what's going on, that affect our children and affect future generations. Just curious, do you have any employees calling from in those studios, asking for prayer that are worried and concerned because of the agendas they have to work under?
Absolutely, and especially, in fact, Peggy and I were watching a movie last night, and it went into some real, not good scenes, and we were talking about that, of having to work in that environment and those constraints, and it's really hard on the actors. I've had many actors that call me and say, should I take this role? I got to sign a nudity clause, or maybe that I'll do a homosexual scene or whatever. And they say, I'm just uncomfortable with it. And so we pray together and I say, God's got your career. God, they get threatened by their agents sometimes.
Yeah. Oh my God.
It's like, if you don't sign this waiver, I'm not going to represent you because there's 100 people that will, and, I've seen time after time, someone who just said no, and respectfully, and God opened up the most important roles of their lives.
Yes.
Right, very quickly down the road.
Yeah, there's a gentleman that, in fact, I've interviewed him on the show. He's very popular now in the Christian movie scene, but he was a Hollywood actor. And then they asked him to do a nude scene, and he said, nope. and he left Hollywood. And he decided he wasn't even going to do acting anymore. And then suddenly, years later, an opportunity came up in Christian acting, and he did it. And now he's actually the principal actor in one of the major movies that came out a couple of years ago called Overcomer. So his career has completely taken off. I mean, he has no time anymore because he's going from movie role to movie role, and it's because he took a stand and God honored that.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, when I was, and this is again going back years ago with Unpolitically Incorrect, I'll never forget one time I saw on Master Media where they were praying for Bill Maher. And I happened to be on that night. I said, "Hey, Bill, look." And I pulled this thing up. I go, "Look, you're getting prayed for." You know, and he goes, "By who?" And I go, "It's Master Media. And, you know, they pray for different people in the business." He goes, "Well, what if I don't want you to pray for me? What if I don't want people to pray for me?" I said, "It doesn't matter because it's not up to you. We're praying for you. So whether you want it or not, people are going to be praying for you." And then literally, like, I think it was like 3 weeks later, he did a show on Hollywood, God in Hollywood. And, you know, what if you know, prayer and praying for people. And it affected him. I think he just didn't even know that happened. So it does impact even the famous. How, if people are hearing you talk about, okay, it's for praying and having the relationship and community, but how can people get involved? How can the everyday person get involved with Master Media? What can they do?
There's three ways, and they just go to our website, mastermedia.com. But one, they can join our community. We'll keep them abreast of different events or gatherings we're having in these various regions, as well as tap into information that's online and courses that are going to be, or speaker series that are going to be offered online if they don't live anywhere near one of the media regions. Second of all, you referenced the Media Leader Prayer Calendar. They can sign up for the prayer calendar, which sends out both a text as well as an email every single day, 2 people in Hollywood to pray for. And third, they can support us financially. We're a nonprofit, and partner with us on this journey and the work that we're doing within the media world.
So for people that are like, pray for Hollywood, or I have a ministry, well, you're doing the work. They can just contribute, and guess what? It's being done.
That's right.
So where do they go to do all this? Got a website that they need to go to?
Yeah, mastermedia.com.
Mastermedia.com. All righty, folks.
Yeah.
You heard it right here. You can become a part of influencing Hollywood, or at least sending God all over Hollywood. And just simply go to mastermedia.com and learn how you can help out. We've run out of time. As always, time just flies when we're doing this show.
And actually, it's all over the world, isn't it? Now it's not just Hollywood; it's worldwide now with media.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Dan, for spending some time with us and sharing your story. Folks, I just want to remind you that you can write us at faithonfilmtv@gmail.com. That's faithonfilmtv@gmail.com. And, of course, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at faithonfilmtv. Dan, again.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, thank you so much. I look forward to see what else
My pleasure. I love
from
seeing you guys.
Master Media. We'll see you next week.